Yasmina.
The professor, are we on Gilligan's Island now?
I guess that makes you Gilligan.
I'm ugly enough.
Thank you, little buddy.
You said it, not me. What's up, folks?
Nothing much, man. Yeah. Hello, everybody. I lost my voice, so Manzi's gonna run this meeting right now. So
You lost your voice?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. You should probably go find it.
Whoa.
Should we give it a couple more minutes or
I
remind people of the topic?
think we're good. I think mainly everybody is here. But the topic for this meeting today is preference and personality. I think it's kind of like an extension on what we talked about last week in terms of free will.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, we're kind of talking about, well, what makes us us? And so to what extent do we have control over what makes us us? Or how do we attain these preferences and personalities? And what does that tell other people about us? Something along those lines. Yep.
Yeah, right on. And again, I'll kind of second that. It's it's a question of where our individuality kind of originates from, and part of that kind of led us to towards the end of last time talking about again, why is it that you may prefer certain things or find certain things to be either beautiful versus vulgar or moral versus immoral? I think that's kind of where it was coming from. Like, is morality a matter of taste or is it a matter of fact? And it seemed like a lot of people were more or less, if not outright stating this, they're kind of articulating their moral points in a way that made it kind of seem like maybe it's more a matter of taste, maybe it's more a matter of culture, and it's more relative. And if that's the case, then yeah, depending on where you come from, your moral perceptions, your moral sensibilities will be shaped one way versus another. And if you expose yourself to more moral positions, maybe your moral palette expands. And then that kind of gave rise to, well, where do we get opinions or tastes from in the first place? And how does that result in something like individual idiosyncratic personality traits? So it's kind of you got to follow it. But I think that was the thread. Where did your personality come from? That might be another way to put it.
Looks like Fortuna wants to say something. Go ahead.
Oh, I got to look at these chats.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sorry. So I'm in the middle of doing my hair right now, but I will say that what Manzi was talking about, this automatically reminded me of, I figured out recently why I'm terrified of bugs, like absolutely terrified, and I wasn't terrified of bugs when I was younger until I saw other people's reactions to me holding a bug, and they would flip out, and that actually instills that fear of bugs into you. And I think the same comes from preferences like, I really like sweet foods because I associate it with happy memories when I'm younger. And different, different things like that. So I definitely think it's kind of deterministic in that sense that our kind of personalities and like preferences choose us. That being said, I did recently learn that taking a bite of food a couple times actually makes you, like that food. I don't know if you guys have ever had any experiences with not liking a certain type of food, but as you grow older, you begin to like it more. So I definitely think that part of it, to a certain extent, can be controlled. So I think it's kind of, where's that bright line, that we're probably going to get into.
Yeah, great point.
Thank you.
I mean, again, do particular experiences play a very determining role in who you become and who you continue to be?
Yeah.
Because you didn't choose to be scared by the bug.
Maybe changed,
Yeah, for sure. It's again, it's one of those things where, and not to get too psychological right off the bat here, but yeah, it's like, well, if certain occurrences that transpire when we're too young to recall them or make sense of them, if it turns out that those things have a dramatic impact on what we understand to be moral, what we understand to be, again, beautiful or ugly or you know, cool or not so much, or funny or not funny. I mean, the question really becomes, well, how free are you to decide for yourself who you are and what your personal identity is? I mean, is your freedom basically you're free to deal with the experiences that you had as a child, and that's where your freedom lies, which isn't really an expansive understanding of freedom?
Yeah, I
Something
think also it kind of relates to like how I think you've said it before, like at a certain age or a certain period of your life, that's when you can really use your freedom and really, because first you have to understand the circumstances and the boundaries that you're in before you can use your freedom, right? And so like at what age or what point is it that you really become, I guess, quote unquote, free to choose? Because, you know, like how Fortuna said, to some extent, it's kind of all predetermined in a sense. Not all, but to some extent. Let's see here. Christopher.
his
you're
voice is
next.
Well, I'll continue that thought by saying this. I'm taking probably a different class than you guys are taking, but in my class, we're talking about how neuroscience has found out that what the brainwaves before you make an actual decision occur before you even know that they occur. So this to me says that maybe it's predetermined, and I can't remember the name. Is a German word, Bandschrift or whatever. It's called the brain activity that happens before you're conscious of it happening, means that you will make that choice to be afraid of those bugs before you even know you're going to be afraid of it. And to me, that starts to really, they figured out to 80% at this point how much of that previous brain activity will determine the choice that you make. And the more that this happens, the more I find that a philosophical discussion about free will can be had, because that means predeterminism by things that we don't understand yet. And I guess I'll leave it there, but the brain activity that precedes a choice happens before we know about it, and they can document it. So it starts to look like a very deterministic world to me, which breaks my heart. But that's what it looks like, and I'll shut up.
I got something when we got time. Just building off the current conversation, using your freedom and determining when you can based off of your childhood stuff. It's all got to do with awareness. When you become self-aware of your patterns, of your surroundings, the patterns of them, people, cities, whatever town you're in, there's a general pattern to all of it, because they've all usually been around each other for a few years, and you start to commingle and you start to run on the same frequency. Talking about the predetermined reactions of your brain to outside stimulus, to a question. Your brain neurons firing off before you've even thought anything. I don't think that has to do with predetermined destiny, reality. I think our body has sensors to outside stimulus other than our ears, our eyes, and our nose and our mouth. And it will react. Your brain's going to fire off to outside surrounding stimulus before your thoughts,
Before you even know it.
before you ever know what's going on. Before most people ever understand what's going on, your body's already reacting to it. It's trained. It's trained from trauma. It's trained from life experiences. Like I said, it begins with awareness.
Well, I
As
think
far as getting into that, tapping into it, you've got to become aware of your programmed responses. Like I said, this is all based off past experiences. You get enough clarity, you can start riding that wave. Now you can ride it for so long. It depends on what you put into it. You can push it to one side or the other. If you want to go positive and negative, you can ride that back and forth. You can push one direction or the other as hard as you want, but there's always going to be a rebound. It's like a sine wave. It's going to rebound back and forth until it steadies out. You can push the good side, or you can push the bad side, but you can't outrun that line.
Well, real quick, just so I understand what you're saying. So when you, because I like what you're saying here, it's interesting to me, this idea of like the bounce back. So that's kind of like,
It's a frequency.
if I understand you. So you're trying to sort of fight back against the default kind of mechanisms that
Yes.
have, yeah. And so no matter how hard you try, you're saying at a certain point, like an elastic band, it's going to snap back.
You can only run. You can try to outrun it,
Right.
but you're gonna, if you push too hard, yeah, you're gonna get popped in the face.
Yeah. Are you going to snap?
Yeah, or you'll lose your mind. Start rambling off some random stuff, some weird stuff. They'll tell you, hey, you read into the situation. You're reading into way too much. No. I am sorry that I'm more aware of things, but I'm not reading into shit.
I hear you. Try to watch that mouth. We're recording this. Having said that, well, okay, you know what? I do want to go back and forth on that, but I rather let's hear from some other people. I'm trying to remain mindful of the chat with me.
There's more than what the current subject required, I'd imagine. Just somewhere in there.
Yeah, okay. So we're gonna go, John is next here.
So it kind of dovetails with this, but it takes it a slightly different direction. I was talking to a friend of mine within the last couple of days, jokingly about watching horror movies. And his response was, I specifically try to avoid doing that because I have so active of an imagination that I'll let myself get so deep and then convince myself that certain things can happen after the movie's over. And so I kind of took a step with that, processing that, and said, so say, for example, you go see an Aliens movie of some flavor. Does that mean that you're going to convince yourself that if you don't look around in the shower that an alien's going to come through the ceiling, or if you sleep in a locked room that you're going to be impregnated, something along those lines like we see in a lot of these movies? And he said, yeah, my brain will convince myself that certain things can happen that I know intellectually, emotionally, spirit, that are not possible to the best of our knowledge, but I'll let my brain will convince itself that certain things can happen. So to kind of Manzi's point and the way some other people are talking, especially what Garvin was kind of describing, where does that fit? In my mind, I'm kind of wondering, where does that fit within that same elastic band? But then within that elastic band, what's the tether? I understand what you're saying as far as a sine wave, but what's the actual tether that snaps me back to that reality? Is it my humanness? Is it an epistemological, some sort of centering? Is it a karmatic centering? What's the actual thing that tethers me back? And what am I being tethered back to? My mind, my body, my spirit, something else? I don't know. And it's an interesting thing for me to sort of wonder about, because I've wondered about that quite a bit even before I started taking philosophy.
Oh.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that, but yeah, let's make sure everybody who's throwing out exclamation marks here speaks, and then we can circle back around.
Yeah, Peter is next here. Wait, is there a Peter on here still?
Yeah.
You're Texas Rangers.
So I just wanted to note, I don't stand in either side of this, but it's important to note that there's some genetic disposition to personality traits. So taking addiction, for example, I know there's studies out there that have shown that, kids of parents who have addictions will show similar traits of addictions, whether it's the same substance or a different substance. The only thing I can account for me, for example, is my father used to smoke cigarettes for 30 years, and I got to a point myself, kind of after my college years, of getting to smoke a pack of cigarettes a day. And then I had convinced myself within months to be able to quit cold turkey, which wasn't easy. But having known my oldest brother was able to, Chris.
Sorry.
Having known my oldest brother and my father were able to do it, I therefore was able to convince myself that I would be able to do it. Not necessarily that that's the same as true for everyone else with addiction issues, but I think there's, of course, a genetic disposition to take into account.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's kind of gets at the meat of this kind of topic, honestly, because that's also kind of what Fortuna alluded to in terms of predeterminism, is like the idea of genetics, it's kind of it's sort of the idea of nature versus nurture. And I believe it's like a combination of both. It's like, because you were to an extent certainly genetically predisposed, but it was because of your experiences with your dad and your brother that you were able to kind of combat that addiction yourself. So it's like, it's the same for all of us. Because in a sense we have like these different combinations of, okay, well, I might be predisposed to something, but because I've experienced something else, I'm not necessarily going to go down that same route.
All right, but if science can predict what you're going to do seconds before you do it, which it can, up to 80% ratio now, your actions aren't even your own at all. They've figured out that those synapses firing inside your skull know what you're going to do before you even know what you're going to do. And this really freaked me out because I think I have a choice. Nope. Your synapses are firing, and then we can predict with 100%, 80% right now what you're going to do. And neurobrain surgery.
You kind of have to ask yourself, then how are those synapses formed, and how are those different reactions formed? Those are all formed through, once again, experience.
The
I guess you could put it that way.
Interesting.
Because I mean, like this whole idea, I mean, it's I don't know, I forgot what I was gonna say. But let's see. Anybody else? Okay, awesome.
Is that Fernanda?
See, qualifying time. How about you, Fernando? You got anything to say, man? Being awfully quiet.
I wasn't sure if I was next, and
Oh yeah, I think you put it in the chat and you see it.
people don't talk. People scream. No, not you guys in my house. Yeah, I won't
My house too.
expect that much. That much. Well, it is interesting what you're saying. I didn't know that science can predict seconds before we actually do something. But I guess this is a kind of like directed question. Do you believe that we can kind of like format those synapses to do what we would like to do before we even know? I don't know if this makes sense. Like, for example, like, because for me, it seems like then our body is taking control over us, but you can change the pathway that you do, your actions. So like maybe through some like steps, I forgot the word in English, I'm sorry. It's kind of like, maybe through some like,
Protocol?
yeah, let's say protocol, but it's similar to what I was trying to say. You can start like kind of like restructuring or like re-educating those synapses so they do something more in the pathway that what you're doing. I don't know if that makes sense.
Like conditioning.
Changing your thoughts.
Yeah, like train your thoughts before, so they do what you wanted to do before you even know.
Well, are you kind of getting at like the idea of conditioning your habits, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Like we always talk about things like that inner voice that we have in our head and how we react to situations. Like maybe if you identify it and say, well, maybe I'm being a little too negative in my inner voice right now. What if I then start to look at things more positively and I start to stop that voice? You know,
Yeah.
exactly how you're, yeah.
Because that seems to me very predefined, and I don't like it. Yeah, something around those lines, like cognitive behavioral therapy. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing though, like I think what Christopher was kind of getting at is this idea that our mind kind of functions in a way that we don't really even understand. We even have the existence of the subconscious and then all these things that kind of factor in as to how we make our decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of habits, even that in and of itself is kind of subliminal and it's kind of hard to combat. But I think there's something even more to that we might not even know about. And so to what extent do we have control over ourselves? It's like we have to start at a very like primary direction, in a very primary direction. Yeah.
No, like for me, this quarantine has been quite on the spot in that regard, because there were a couple of things that I felt there was more, let's say, patience about. And all of a sudden, I feel like I have less patience for those specific things. And I kind of like stopped, like, hey, you know what? I used to be more relaxed. Like if I was doing a homework, I could just do a homework easier than right now. So it's kind of like, hey, I need to change this. So it kind of like, I feel like there has been like an internal process again to like relocate that, let's say, patient right now into the spot that it once, and has been okay. But well, I'm pretty sure that somebody else wants to speak. I don't want to take too much of the time.
No, well, I think you raised a really important question. I kind of want to ask Christopher now. Like those synapses that you were speaking of earlier, do you think that we could ever understand enough to, like how he said, kind of reshape and reform them?
Well, I mean, I guess I would have to read the experiments and all that. But what I'm saying is this: we can all say that there's some basic part of you that's involuntary. If you live in the United States, it's different than living in, let's say, I don't know, Russia. So some of it is cultural, and some of it's, you know, the places and states where you live. Some of it's what people think is cool, or I mean, like racism ain't cool anymore. And I mean, but what I'm saying is, they have figured out now, and I got an article from my teacher. I had to write a paper on it that says they figured out to 80% possibility what you'll do before you do it. I'll post the paper here as soon as I find it. Well, that to me means I sort of get into that garden thing about your life is no more valuable than an oyster. And I want to take it negatively and say, well, crap, you know, I don't have to do anything more than an oyster does. And then I read a post today that says, because I took it negatively, what is life about? Well, it's either about live free or die. Live or die. And the oyster lives or it dies. We can live or we can die. Well, I kind of took it to, it doesn't matter what I do because I'll die. But then I read somebody else's post that said, it matters everything that you do because you will die. And that's kind of my thing. If they can figure out what I'm going to do already, I'm going to try to freak them out and, you know, double down on a pair of twos or something. But if you can figure out with 100% through the synapses that fire before I even know a choice that I'm going to make, my freedom of will is predetermined to 80% right now. Before my freedom of action, then nothing's really free. And it's the Big Bang Theory. It's all predeterminism. I want to be a compatibilist. And I'm trying to figure out a way to get there. That's what I'm saying.
This is a very interesting thing because, like, now let's put it into different terms. So yeah, let's say, yeah, in some sense we're predetermined. We're kind of embedded in that way. But let's take maybe an artificial intelligence or maybe a robot that we've programmed to do specific things, right? If that robot, in a sense, becomes conscious and then is able to see its programming and understand, well, I was programmed to do this, can that robot ever become free from that?
I'm not sure. I have no answer. I don't believe we know enough to know enough. Like Robin McNamara said, I don't know enough to know enough that I don't know anything. I mean, that's why this is philosophy. But I'm really curious. If one of y'all figures it out, please let me know.
No, that's an interesting thought, but I don't know. Because, for example, like the thing is that what, in this case, the computer is watching is exactly what allows him to work. So it's not like, well, the way we operate like computers, and I guess we are kind of like the same at some extent, like it has its limitations. So, I mean, yeah, it's probably better to understand, but can he really change it? Like without an external, like by itself, you know, because I guess we can update it and we can like upgrade the mechanism, but it's something from the outside who does that.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something that we can explore. Like maybe by ourselves, we cannot do it, but with something extra outside us, we can actually like explore that and like become more free, maybe.
Yeah, and I
With
think
that analogy.
I think also like the difference between us and machines and us and programmed robots is that like something that's programmed to do something kind of they operate in a certain line that they have to follow. But us, it's more of like it's action and reaction. Is that we're constantly reacting to things, and that kind of skews us in certain directions. And because that is the case, then could you say, well, then can there be something that's controlling even the outer stimuluses? And in that sense, we're kind of being controlled.
I mean, couldn't you say that we control the outer stimulus insofar as we decide to what extent it matters to us?
No, you guys said earlier the pathways are predetermined, and predetermined pathways. So no, you can't break out of that racist Southern mode, or no, I mean, no, you can't
I don't think
believe.
that's true.
No, if the pathways are predetermined, which I don't believe, I'm really trying hard to be a libertarian. I'm really libertarian is what I really want. But the more I learn about the way the brain operates and everything, the more I think there's something else there that we just don't know yet. And we're going to have to find it. And that's the realm of philosophy. Until we figure out, once science gets this thing up to 100%, we're going to have to come up with some other bull stuff to try to make it where we still have a choice. Because I believe I chose to join this group, but was I predestined to do it? And I'll mute myself. But I have a real hard time with this neuroscience firing thing. Anyway.
It's all destiny. We're all destined to be on this Zoom call. That's what it is.
Well, let's hope so. I made a lot of jokes in my thing about the end of the Forrest Gump where he says, I don't know if everything is predestined or if it was just a feather floating on the wind. I think both are happening at the same time, but none of us really knows. It's just all us here arguing about it. And I think that's how we get better is let's argue with each other until we get it right. And then we'll find something else to argue about. And I'll mute myself and listen.
Priscilla is next on the chat here. Hello, Priscilla?
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I had to fix my microphone. So I had a question about, I've been listening to this, I think it's a book on Audible, and it's called Never Split the Difference. And it's about negotiating. And I was thinking about how everything is determined, but you can influence. If you could influence someone, then would that be changing the course of a deterministic path?
What
Or
if
would
you're
that,
determined to influence them?
well, the book, so the Audible, or I don't know what it's called, but it's about like influencing people and negotiating with them, negotiating them to do like to get things, kind of like manipulating someone to do something.
Just, I think isn't that the book that is like the CIA that used to be
Yes,
at the
it's
top?
about like detectives and stuff.
It
trying
was
to,
like the top something of hostages in the world, something like that. And now he's teaching like everything is a decision, and I will teach you how to do so, something like that.
I think I have that book. That's funny.
Commercial.
I think I have that same book.
Yeah, and so that's what I was thinking about. Well, if everything is determined, how can people influence each other and manipulate each other?
Or
Does that-
maybe he was determined to be influenced by the other person. in the
Maybe
first
that's
place.
what I'm trying. That's what I've been listening to. It's like whenever someone is like in a tough situation, they could either like want to get out of it and like listen to what the detective or whatever the other person that's trying to kind of
But that does remind me of, for example, like when you're in the sport, mostly you like, well, at least the data says that those who like the team who wins is already pretty much defined in a big extent according to how much the team has been playing together, how much the team has like been like working together and all that stuff. Like there is really a low percentage is kind of like left out of luck according to like something that happens in the situation. So I guess it kind of relates to what you're saying. But I in particularly, I do not believe that things are that predestined because I don't think that's how it works. Otherwise, then once we figure it out, everything is already mapped out, and it would be extremely boring, in my opinion.
So does that mean we do in a sense? I mean,
I think that you can, like in the case that you're saying, I believe that the person who has more experience trying to convince other may do it, but it's more because of experience than because it was supposed to happen. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, you could say that maybe the way that the two people interact and react with each other, that was kind of in a sense predestined. And so if that was predestined, then that interaction in and of itself can be seen as predestined. I mean, really, we can call it anything this and that, but I think ultimately it just, I think, goes back to what Christopher's saying, is that we don't really know in the end. But
Yeah.
I really like how you put it in terms of sports, because in sports, like how you said, you can kind of sort of map out who's going to beat who. But then you always have like a spontaneous kind of factor that you don't know of that kind of causes like certain games and certain things to lead to another
Yeah,
direction.
like an injury, like or the weather, or maybe some like they fought right before the game, and then now they don't want to pass the ball,
And so
something like that. But yeah,
perhaps maybe there are certain like predestined like variables in our life, and yet there still remains like these spontaneous events that maybe could change courses. Fortuna, I believe, is waiting to go. So, yeah.
Hey guys, I liked what y'all were saying about sports, and it reminded me of this author called Malcolm Gladwell. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He's pretty popular, and he basically talks about how, like, for example, in Canada, your chances of making it into the National Hockey League are pretty much predetermined by what month you were born in. So that kind of plays a role into what y'all were saying, and it's a whole book. I'll put it in the chat, but if y'all are interested in that kind of stuff, it definitely thank you, Christopher. It'll definitely be helpful. But also, I was thinking about how I think was it Christopher that was saying something about a person becoming conservative and not being able to change those beliefs. And I think I can't really speak a lot on this topic because I'm still young, and so maybe when I get older, maybe I'll be more set in my ways. I don't really know for sure because I'm still a 19-year-old kid, but I definitely was raised being Christian, and I was taught by my parents and everyone else around me by example that being Christian was the best religion to be, but I'm kind of not anymore. I mean, not even kind of, I'm just not Christian anymore. So, sorry. Okay, so yeah.
Let me finish, John.
Huh?
Nothing, I'm talking to Floyd.
And so definitely I think like it's kind of a lazy train of thought to think, as much as I am a determinist, it's definitely a lazy train of thought to think, well, I can't help who I am. I can't help my personality traits. I can't help my beliefs, because you kind of can, you kind of can reevaluate and rethink kind of what Christopher was saying about us having these conversations and, our beliefs changing and forming as we speak. Even me having this conversation with you guys made me realize made me realize, forget that. I can change my beliefs. I can change with this, preordained destiny if I have enough determination to, just the same way, I changed being a Christian, or how some people changed becoming smokers, even though their parents were possibly addicts. So, yeah.
And I think
just a
pretty good.
disclaimer: this is no longer PG-13, so go nuts.
I think with PG-13, you're allowed to say the F word one time, so we're still good.
We're adhering to student life protocol, people.
Okay,
Written
so
student.
all curse words bad?
Yeah, that's what I've been told.
Okay, all right, we're gonna good place this.
Yeah, it's not my preference. Hey, remember the topic?
It's okay, guys. No one watches enough to care.
That's very true.
Oh,
You know
and
what?
Christopher
To hell with
pluralism is definitely awesome. There's
hell
another
with it.
author who writes about pluralism that I really love.
I did.
I don't think that's a terrible idea. I mean, if the neural pathways are set, then they're set. If it's predetermined, then it's predetermined. I still have the illusion of free will, so I will choose not to screw the next guy over. I'm gonna do the best thing as I see it within my worldview, and then I embrace many worldviews. So all I can do is the best I can do in my own little fish tank here. And I don't think that's wrong for any of us. If you're doing the best you can do with what that cards you're dealt, I mean, until we die, we don't know if we get a new hand. You might as well be the oyster or not be the oyster, or be the oyster or not be the oyster. It's okay to
Be the
doubt,
pearl.
question, and live live hard and love a lot and try not to park in somebody else's spot, I guess would be.
I guess also that kind of goes into this idea that you can do what you please, but you can't change what you please, if that makes sense. So like you can do what you will in terms of, I think we can have it both ways. We can have free will and we can have determinism in terms of our personality traits, because I don't think I can control wanting to change my personality for the better, right?
Yeah.
So therefore I can change my personality for the better.
Well, can I just say, even when it comes to things, because I like this conversation, but getting it back to like tastes and preferences, I like that we're kind of going macrocosm here, just like what is freedom? I think that's awesome. But you know, kind of, it's like this. Let's say, for example, that we do live in kind of a mostly deterministic world, which is to say, you don't decide. It's not up to you whether or not you are going to enjoy things that taste a certain way, et cetera, et cetera. You're raised in such a way where first you're a human, so there are certain things you need, and then you're a human in this time period, so there are certain things you think, and then you're born into this family and this nation, et cetera, et cetera. So let's assuming all of those forces are very persuasive, very, very impactful. I still wonder if there's not a kind of freedom that's nonetheless rewarding. So, for example, you could say you're raised in an environment where, I'll use my own environment, for example, raised in an Italian household. I had tomato sauce and everything, every meal growing up. You could say, I really like tomato sauce. I really like bread. I really like fried chicken cutlet, whatever the case may be. And those are the flavors I appreciate. But I can say to myself, well, you know what? I need to stop eating all of that garlicky tomato sauce and all of the fried foods because it's making me unhealthy. And then I go ahead and, despite my tastes not changing, I decide for myself I can abstain from indulging those tastes. But then what happens is that over the course of time, I start, instead of eating fried chicken cutlets, I eat, vegetables and steamed broccoli and sauteed spinach and stuff. Eventually, I'm going to start craving that stuff. And the idea of eating like a Big Mac it's no longer going to appeal to me. So I was born with these default tastes, but through my own actions and through my own deliberations, I've literally changed what I think is tasty or not tasty. So you still do have that freedom. Yeah, you could say we're pre-programmed to have to eat, and therefore the process of eating is something that concerns us. Does it taste good? Does it not taste good? That's an issue for us. We think about it. But even within that predetermined sort of situation or arrangement, you're free.
Well, I think we're looking at determinism in a kind of really, maybe not the full picture, because I think what Fortuna and Christopher were saying was kind of in line with what I believe is like this idea that you can believe in a deterministic world and then still embrace freedom. As I like, okay, well, you know what? Right now, I feel like I have very lazy habits. I'm a lazy person. You could say that. But you know what? Maybe it's destiny for me to change. And so that's the whole idea there. It's not necessarily like that destiny is, oh, I'm a certain person, I will always be that person. No, it's just this idea of like you have different points in your life where you have choices to be different. And what you will choose in those points is completely up to you, but in a sense, it's kind of predestined.
Is that more evolution-based or more theologically based?
You could argue from both standpoints, in my opinion.
Because something's got to be doing the destining, if that makes sense. Somebody's got to be setting the destinations.
If you're talking about like in terms of like, let's talk outside of theological. Let's just say.
Yeah, who and what? Who's what? Who's doing it? Show it to me. Who's doing it?
You can call it pure probability, pure chance. If you go and you take a projectile and then you throw it, and you can calculate where that is going to land due to different kinds of factors. And if you could take it back to the very beginning of the universe and say, well, okay, well, these certain factors, these certain things, like these certain planets are going to be created, these beings are going to exist, so on and so forth. Like that's if you had that kind of knowledge. But to that extent, that's kind of what I'm saying here is that maybe there doesn't necessarily have to be a God for predestination to exist. Not them saying that there is no God, of course.
So what you guys saying, y'all kind of saying that like, essentially say you do make the decision, it takes 21 days to make a habit, right? Is that kind of what y'all are saying, that you kind of have to make that decision every single day to actively eat your vegetables or do your homework or clean your room, or else you're going to go back into your old ways? Or is it like what Manzi said, y'all think y'all can completely revert to something new entirely?
I think it's a matter of will. You know what I mean? I think it's a matter of strength of willpower. Yeah, I mean, look, I feel everybody's saying, and you know, especially this point of we're talking about destination, but really it's in the context of your origins. We're talking about these habits and these sort of predispositions, maybe genetically as well. Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that stuff. Habits die hard, you know. Your default settings are probably going to stick with you permanently, even if it's just the basis by which you compare everything else to, even your new self.
But
But
also,
I think, yeah,
sorry. I was gonna say, like, in terms of your example, that really kind of resonated with me because, to a certain extent, like, I think that ability to be picky about what you eat is also predetermined because maybe back, you know, in a different time, in a different period, in a different country, you don't really have the option to dislike or like anything. You know, you're just kind of eating to survive, to sustain yourself. You don't really have that luxury as we do nowadays to say, hey, you know what, I prefer this food over that food. Or even in American society where cheap food is usually a lot more unhealthy for you, so they kind of don't really have a choice insofar as eating, you know, cheaper food if you're having to live in poverty and eating unhealthy food as a result of that.
yeah, and that's when politics become very important. When what's permitted and what's not permitted becomes like central. I like that point in the chat there, Peter.
Yeah.
But do you want to give expression to that? We could explore that idea because that's what it was. Quantum mechanics came up last time.
It's just kind of an idea that since we can't predict things that come through, or we can't yet predict things that come through quantum mechanics, so that it does, even certainly if we can discover that it all comes up to chance, and that could be the enactment of that small margin of where it's not all predetermined, because quantum mechanics still can defy what we would expect to happen.
Yeah, definitely. But I also think it goes in line with the idea of like even things that are inexplicable now will be explainable later. I think that's a word.
Yeah, but why do you have faith in that? Is it because of the progress we've made in knowing things up to this point through science and stuff? Or
Well, I would say that's kind of the only counter that we have to that, because I mean, obviously, you have the point where it's like a lot of things that we have now, if you take it back in time, it would be seen as magic to someone else. But I think that's the whole idea of it. I mean, is knowledge finite, or is it infinite? You know.
and that begs the question, well, are the knowers of knowledge finite or infinite? That might have something to say about knowledge itself. Okay, cool. I'm sorry, I'm trying to catch up with the chats here.
Just ramblings.
Uh,
I had I wrote a few more down. The interaction, talking about persuasion, you could get as far as manipulation. I guess depending on how far you push it. How much of the interaction is just wordplay and maybe battle of wits, and how much of it is emotional? I think emotional awareness plays a big part in a lot of things in our lives. Emotional intelligence, but
Age matters a lot. The older you get, age matters a lot.
you've got to realize that we're
I hear that.
made mostly water, and this thing fires off of electricity and chemicals, and it's got a natural ability to make some pretty good ones. It's where your happiness and your greater euphoric feelings come from. But and a lot of this comes from personal opinions. I'm sure a lot of everybody else's words does as well, because this is not in the text. But how much emotional awareness do we have? I think that's one of the first triggers, that when your neurons fire, your chemicals start moving around as well. Hair on your neck will stand up. Your heart rate elevates. Your breathing shallows. It doesn't matter whether you're laying in an ambush waiting on somebody to walk by, or you're in a restaurant. Our bodies react in the same way to similar stimulus. And it'll cause physical reactions. And it's not always a visual thing. It's not always auditory. Sometimes you don't even have to hear them speak. It's just a proximity thing.
Just to jump on that, I think you're really onto something there. Going back to the previous question too about like persuasion, because I was looking at the chat, persuasion versus manipulation. I think a lot of it kind of does come down to where you're getting at here, Rodney or Garvin, is the emotions side of it. Is that if you can make somebody feel like they're making their own decision, and you have the feeling of freedom that you're able to engender in other people, like they're the ones choosing to buy the car from you or something like that.
Right.
You have that sense of freedom because even if intellectually you kind of realize that you're being sort of guided, if it feels like your choice, emotionally speaking, you're almost in a weird way okay with it. Like I do think there's something to the idea that freedom is felt before I guess it's understood. If that makes sense. I think there is something to that.
I would have one comment.
Yeah.
In those situations, when you're pulling up, you're driving there, you're leaving the house or whatever, pay attention. Pay attention to yourself. And then when a salesman, especially a used car salesman, walks up to you, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" with a bunch of excitement, watch and see how your body responds to it.
No, you're right. I've been there.
Because they'll drag you around in circles.
He did.
I think there's something to note. Something I discovered in practicing meditation, which I haven't lately, but one of the philosophies and reasonings behind why you want to practice meditation is because it provides a buffer between your reactive state of mind and you're accepting what's going on and then reacting to it separately. In terms of like a definition, it's like trying to work out the muscle of becoming the watcher instead of the reactor purely. It gives you the ability to take a step out, realize what's going on around you and within your body before you make a reaction.
Interesting. Wow.
So I think just because it can be practiced, I think it's something also to consider. Not as an argument, but just supplemental.
There's scientific methods to work towards things.
It suggests that there's a sense of self beyond the mere impressions.
Yeah.
That if you get back away from everything you're experiencing in a meditative way, it suggests there's a deeper part of you than the phenomenon. Like you are not your experiences. You can go beyond your experiences. You can put pause on your experience and meditate on it.
And I think also it kind of gets at the idea of like the more you understand about yourself, like the more you understand your boundaries, the more free you are from them in a sense, or are able to become free from them. I've always been interested in meditation. That's awesome.
Can you pull yourself outside of that box in a public situation?
Well, here's the thing. I think it depends. I think that's how well you're able to train yourself to do that. Like how Peter or Manzi was saying too. Like instead of just being completely reactionary, you are able to be the watcher as well. So it's like, okay, I know that in a typical situation I would react like this, but perhaps I won't today. Yeah.
And that sounds like freedom from.
I mean, I get it a lot. Sometimes you're confronted with questions that, I guess in Texas, this is downright Texas, you got to answer man questions and you think, well, I'm going to do it with my hands. You can do it with your brain. You can step back. You can walk away. You get in your car. There are infinite number of answers you can't see. But in that second, have your neural pathways been set for that? But for me, I think the more different answers that you have to choose from, the better. And I would hope for myself that I keep increasing the number of answers as I age and learn, would be what I think.
Wow, yeah, I like how you put that. Fortuna, you're next.
Oh, I didn't realize I was going next.
Oh, I thought your hand was raised. I'm sorry. I didn't.
Oh, sorry, that was from a minute ago. I'm gonna lower it.
My bad. Okay. Let's see here.
Where's the hand raise thing? Is that what we're using?
So are you we're using the
I
chat
thought
still,
I
but-
thought we were using the chat, but the chat has been like on and on.
We're using the chat, but if someone raises their hand and there's no exclamation mark, I just call on them.
I mean, I raised it like I think like 10 minutes ago, but there was someone before me. So now I don't even see my question mark, so it's all right.
All right.
Oh, we can scroll up. We have that capability.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Garvin looks like he wants to say something.
Talking about neurons, neural pathways and stuff being set, connections made and set in stone. And this is where the changing your thoughts things plays a role into it, is reconfiguring. You got some neural pathways that are already there from however long ago you've been running on them. Sometimes they're running in the background, you don't know it. Sometimes they're running in real time. But breaking those habits and reconnecting those neural pathways. Now, what you're talking about reconnecting is memories and emotions. Reconnecting those emotions to different the emotions to different memories, or reconnecting those past memories to better emotions if they're terrible. But getting into the changing your neural pathways, what happens when you have a brain injury and you lose a section? It's damaged, turned into mush, whatever. Maybe there's a dent. Put some pressure. Maybe you had a tumor, had some sections cut out. You got to relearn to walk again. Well, guess what? You're reprogramming those neural pathways. Say you lose a part of your visual cortex. Maybe not visual, but your motor skills, whatever controls that. You lose a part of that and you can't walk. Well, you go through a process and you learn to walk again, as long as there's not too much spinal damage, and you've got the ability again, and it's rerouted through a different part of the brain or a different area.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I've heard stories about people who had brain tumors, and the people that lived around them said that their personality shifted dramatically, and I think that's very interesting. I mean, it's crazy. And also, I kind of want to talk about how you were talking about memories as well. And I think Nancy can speak to this, is like idea like where we have certain qualities or certain personality traits that are built upon our memories, or certain memories of in our lifetime. So like, then what happens then if those certain memories are maybe like distorted, and maybe if we remember them incorrectly, if we were to remember them correctly, would that then change us?
So last thing I heard is our recollection of our memories are not what we think they are. It's not really true. It's a recollection of some visual images, maybe a short video. There's going to be some emotions involved, and then there's also personal perception of what was going on at the time is involved in, and that changes over the years, I would imagine. My perception surely has changed.
Yeah, I would. That's what I've heard as well. Is that there's no such thing as an accurate recollection of a memory. So what if that's the case? If none of your memories are completely accurate?
Well,
then
the ones you can recollect from your current perception has it changed your opinions?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think that's the right question.
Like, Nancy, like, to what extent do our memories really have an effect on who we are?
The degree to which you choose to value some over others.
Hmm.
And kind of as you lead life and you have different experiences, you look back and you make different choices on those same memories. You say, that memory used to really mean something to me. Now I don't think it's all that meaningful. But if that memory was of an experience of something that you think really formed you, and now you no longer identify with that experience, I mean, everything's changed. The memories changed. You've changed. The world's changed. Yeah. So I mean, something along these lines. It's more along the line. It's not so much that we have memories, and it's not so much we have experiences, regardless of what structures them or determines them. It's more getting back to your initial point, Rolando. It's more about how we as humans are able to, in a human way, respond to them. Not so much react, because that seems too pre-rational. Although I think, as Garvin was saying, there's a lot of that stuff that comes into play, and Topher was saying that as well. But I think I think that the big point is, how we choose to value these memories, these experiences, wherever they come from, and what's more, how we choose to integrate them in the composition of our personal identity. That's why it's up to you to decide who you are, because other people could tell you who you are or what you are, and they could say it's because of where you came from, and it's up to you ultimately whether or not you value any of those renditions, whether or not you value any of those opinions, even if they are true. I'm your son. You could say, I don't care. And then later you could say, oh, it actually means the world to me. You're free to decide what it really means, because as we've discussed, nothing means anything. All right.
And I think even for people who take like a determinist standpoint, I think they'll say like, yeah, that freedom, that idea of freedom, even if you want to call it an illusion of freedom, it's important. It's something that is necessary within your life. You need to make decisions regardless of what you believe them to be.
I think Orlando, I think the only thing that we can choose, you just made me think of this, is our decision to believe in free will or determinism, and that can make a lot of difference. And I heard a lot of people, kind of mentioning this, like Manzi, and I think it was Christopher, but our decision to think that things are out of our control, or a decision to take things as they are, versus having the determination to, I guess, change them, definitely plays a big part and definitely makes a huge difference on how we carry ourselves and how we act.
Yeah, definitely. I believe Ferdinando's next.
Last call for comments.
Last call. Oh, wow.
Well, we don't have a time limit anymore for the Zoom chat.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
Because I upgraded it to the premium stuff. But do you want to finish at 4:30 or do you want to extend it? What do you guys want to do?
I mean, I'm okay.
In as much as we have, I really want to be a philosophical libertarianism where I think we do everything we want to do because we want to. If I choose to leave my trash on my front yard, then you can just gripe about it next door. Are there things in me, my own morals, ethics, standards, maybe cultural or hereditary, or, my next neighbor shoots me? I won't do that because of those things, but I'm not really even sure where those come from. Did they come from my parents? No. Did they come from society? No. I really get to decide myself, and I must each and every day, pick up the stone and carry it 6 feet and decide if this is what's right for me. I don't really have to do it right for you. I have to do it right for me, but I'm not even sure where it comes from or what it's for. And that's why I'm talking to you guys, to try to find out. Philosophy is open-ended questions, and I don't know if we've answered any, but we sure have asked some, and I'm going to think a lot about what you all said.
Where do you want to be?
Thank you.
Sure.
I think
I started as something like we are gonna be ending at 4:30, and you can whole speech. Okay, but some of your comments have reminded me of something that I don't remember if I read it or if I watched it or it was something like that, but it was through the power of labels that we have. Like some people, like maybe for example, if you say that you're lazy, let's say that you're lazy, and everybody keeps telling you that you're lazy, and well, not you, but your mind start slowly confirming this identity of you being lazy. So you conform kind of like your actions are being kind of lazy unless you start shifting your mentality. Let's say like if you change the label. So I'm trying to remember exactly how it was said, but I remember that this person was saying, like, for example, like like you have to be very aware of how you define yourself, because even positive labels can have some negative consequences. Like if you think like you're an overachiever, but you said, yeah, I'm an overachiever, but this label will like eventually means that you're also not taking enough time for you to rest and like things through. And it kind of remind me a little bit of your comments to that reading, because um, it does seems like we do kind of like without noticing, and if you don't check yourself constantly, you can kind of like fall into some actions that is not the ones that you really would like to do, but you're just gonna do it because that subconscious that is constantly working and kind of like fighting us over, uh, something like that secret voice that we all have.
Sounds
Yeah.
like awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, Garvin. And I think also, I mean, like, to what extent do
aware
we
of it.
really understand this? Like, when I think about what you're saying about the background, it makes me think of computers and like background data that runs in your computer, and it like takes up so
Yeah,
much. It's so
there's
annoying.
software running inside this
Hmm.
this fleshy quantum computer.
Computer. I don't know about that one.
I like
but it makes me wonder, like, could we really ever fully understand ourselves in that way? And if we
They're
do,
constantly changing.
but not necessarily just that, but like our maybe even our brain, maybe even our mind and how it functions. And if we do, then what consequences will come from it? Will we then be free, quote unquote? Or like what is it really all lead to?
So you're the people you're around are going to notice, especially if they're not keeping up with you. It's best just to stay quiet and hang out with them if you want. If not,
It
Y'all
reminds
work on
me
the
of the Plato and the cave, and where essentially if you try to explain to people what you've come
Yeah.
to know, they'll think you're insane.
yeah, you snatch them up and beat it into them. No, it doesn't work. You can offer suggestions and opinions, but if somebody's not willing to change, not willing to seek, if somebody's comfortable hanging out, just be cool. Or I've been an a-hole to a few people, but
who hasn't. Yeah, no, I see you're getting at this idea of seeking. I wonder if it's not the case that, and maybe I just have to tell myself this because of my profession, but I know I generally believe this, that everybody is seeking. They have their own terms of doing it. They have their own interests, and that's where it shows itself. And just if going back to the whole persuasion thing, if you could get people to sort of, if you could see how interested they are in the things they find interesting, and then bring out the more philosophical dimensions of that, you can see them as a seeker. But you have to be willing to seek yourself.
yeah, I mean, you can, like I was talking about trying to outrun the line. You can run off to the Himalayas and learn how to levitate and stuff if you want. Cool. You gonna stay there forever? You're gonna come back and try to function in the real world. You have to play along if you want to, depending on your circumstances, where you're at. It's
The real world.
society drives it.
Peter, what are you eating?
Popcorn.
Oh, popcorn.
Whoa, John. Okay.
Peter's watching the film. PHILM. Thank you, folks.
Okay, well, I think we can go ahead and start doing final thoughts here. I think if you guys want to do final thoughts, can you just put an exclamation mark on the chat instead of me having to ask everybody like last time? Yeah, if you guys want to say something for final thoughts, go ahead and put an exclamation mark on the chat now.
Orlando, it is kind of fun though when you're like, "Hey, Patricia, you haven't said anything. Do you want any final thoughts?" And then you hear like, "Hi, no thanks. You guys are great." And you hear that like 7 times in a row. It's kind of funny.
Oh my gosh, I know, that's exactly why I'm doing this.
How
All right, let's do it. Let's struggle then. Let's go ahead and do that. B, do you want to say something?
The V.
far y'all get into quantum mechanics? last time.
Okay, she didn't even respond. I'm sorry, Garvin. Let's see. She's not even respond. I wonder if I can unmute people when they're muted. No, I can't.
No, you can request them to mute themselves, but
Oh, I can speak now. I wasn't there for like 3/4 of the conversation, so I don't really have. I don't know where did you guys go to, but for me, when it comes to I think it's just experiences, really. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to. I wasn't here for 3/4 of the topic, so I don't have anything to say. I'm sorry.
Experience sums it up.
you can say anything that you want to say. Like this is, you don't really have to like.
Yeah, you don't
The final thoughts, it doesn't have to be about that subject per se. It's just something that you wanted to say. So like, bye bye guys, or something like that.
I think it's just from experiences and from the people that we look up to. For me, I'm trying to relate this to me because I had like several personality changes where I had my emo phase and my depressive phase. But it's all about experiences and the people that you interact with and the knowledge that you perceive and everything combined. And at the end, your freedom of what you want to do with all of the things that you have gathered.
Nice. I think you kind of summed up what a lot of us are saying. Awesome.
Pretty much.
Dang, VC, you got something to say?
Yeah.
All right.
She's so,
Well, but I'm also sweating right now.
Oh,
she always play that card. She's like, oh, I'm an innocent bee. I don't know what to say. And boom.
I am sweating though. I am. I'm not
She-
kidding. I'm like
She dropped the
thinking-
bomb. Like, I wasn't paying much attention. I mean,
I
what,
wasn't.
I don't know what
came
you're
like
talking.
I came at 4:15.
And then I get educated, boys. Oof.
jeez. Okay. Godfrey, would you like to say something? All right. Gonna give it a few seconds here.
I would take that as a yes.
I'll take it. Alrighty. How about I don't want to butcher your name, but I'll try. Habibullah.
Oh, Godfrey's mic doesn't work. Sorry, Godfrey.
Oh, okay. Alrighty. So I'll assume that Habibullah doesn't want to speak then. How about Sahir? Okay, I think they're good.
I can't say hear you.
That's messed up.
I'm gonna do that for every person now moving forward. Everybody that doesn't say something.
Alrighty. Priscilla, I know you can talk because you were speaking earlier. It's gonna ignore us. That's messed up.
Priscilla, navigate yourself to the microphone. There we go.
Yes, I'm here. Oh,
That's-
yes. Well, I do think that after listening to the conversation, I feel that personality does develop in your early stages. And then after some time of acquiring some knowledge, you get to decide if you want to stick with your personality or you want to change it, or just depending on the circumstance, what route you want to take, which I guess it would be a compatibilistic view on life.
Would you say it's somebody else's fault if they can't change?
No, I do believe that there's some illnesses out there that can prevent someone from changing.
All right, cool.
Yeah. And also,
Okay.
like you said, circumstance. Yeah. So.
Okay, well, I have a lot of studying to do, and it was nice hearing y'all. Are y'all gonna have another session next Tuesday?
As far as we know, yeah.
Yeah, let's keep it rolling. All summer, baby. All summer long. Let's do it. No, yes. So Priscilla, I think we are going to meet again next Tuesday.
Okay, wonderful. Y'all have a great day, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Alrighty. Jennifer, would you like to say something?
If you're going to say it, Jen, if you're going to say it. Dang, that wasn't.
I don't know about that one.
They can't all be gems.
Oh.
Okay. Alrighty. How about Sanika?
we have a lot of like people like ghosting. That
Okay.
like
I think they want to hear my joke. I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
yeah.
Then ha, she has nothing to say. Who's
Oh,
next?
Gosh, Fancy. Annette.
Roasted. I'm just gonna roast every member at the end who does every meeting. That'll be my only contribution.
Would you like to say anything, Annette?
Who? Saniha?
No, did she say? No, she didn't say anything. All
I
right.
don't think she said anything.
And it's so.
I think Annette today.
Yes.
That was a stretch, but okay. Fortuna. There we go.
Okay, so I was really interested in the quantum mechanics aspect of it, because my understanding of quantum mechanics was that this is what happens on the atomic level, and I didn't really understand how that played into human behavior. But I found an article that basically explained how it involves basically the uncertainty of human behavior, and how typically, logically speaking, we're going to try to maximize our positive experiences and try to minimize our negative experiences, kind of like utilitarianism, maximize happiness, decrease pain. But in reality, we don't actually work that way, not necessarily all the time. So I think that's kind of where quantum mechanics kind of can play in. And I'll send the article for anyone else who's confused about that, because I was personally very confused about how quantum mechanics plays a role in decision making, and it kind of helped a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah, I think Peter gives some really good insight on that, actually. He kind of said something very similar to what you said.
I think in this perspective, if there's a metaphorical fork in the road in your brain where a synapse could go one way where you react positively and one way where you react negatively, I think quantum mechanics could be that deciding force, where if the electrons hung out on one end and guided you one direction, was where that may come into play. I'm definitely going to read into this though and learn more. I don't know enough, but that's my thought on it.
Yeah, I think it gets at the idea of just it's so spontaneous, and like we can't really predict it. We can't really predict where that is going to be, and I think that's kind of the main gist of it. Garvin, you're next.
Oh, I figured I'd said too much. I don't know. This is pretty good. Sorry I missed the last two. Feel like I missed out, but
Catch them on YouTube.
they are recorded or they're not.
They are, yeah.
Yeah, they are recorded.
That I will.
Awesome.
Okay, Ferdinando, you're next.
Ooh, okay. Well, final thoughts. My final thought right now is that it's so hot. It's kind of like bugging me. Honestly, I really feel the only moment I can really feel anxious is when it's hot. So it's kind of like affecting me a little bit. But other than that, this conversation, I feel like it felt a little bit differently. I don't know why. I did like it, however. Like, I feel like we were trying really to come up with our answer instead of just saying stuff like kind of like randomly. So I did feel like we were kind of like working together. And it is kind of funny how all of a sudden now, like a big part of our conversation is quantum mechanic. We're kind of like evolving as a group, which is cool. So I'm just happy to be here.
Thanks, man. Always good having you here, honestly. Alrighty, John, you're next.
I have nothing except for my usual thanks everybody for being here, and let's keep it going through the summer, because I'm going crazy without y'all.
All right. Dang it. Peter just left. That's messed up. He was gonna go next. He read something here. I mean, he's texted something here. Thanks for sharing, and thanks to all for philosophizing. I am grateful. Gotta go. Have a great day, everyone. Bye. So I was Peter there for a second.
That was an awful
I'm
interpretation of Peter.
not good at impressions, man.
Peter's losing his voice. I don't know what the deal is. Awfully chatty for somebody who has no voice.
Who else was
Okay, well, I guess I'm next here, and then it's going to be Manzi. Well, I think you guys basically hit every single point. I mean, a lot of things that I've always thought about in terms of personality and preference. I mean, the way I see it is that like our personality comes from like certain ingredients or certain factors in our life, and these experiences and these I guess predisposed, you could call it genetics. That is kind of the ingredients of who we are. You know, we kind of go through life. We start out with this, and how we choose to go about who we are, you know, that can change, and that will inevitably change in a way. So, yeah. Thank you guys for coming, and so on and so forth. And Manzi.
Yeah, I mean, I second Orlando's sentiments. Yeah, and in Fernando's, it was a focused conversation today for sure. And there's nothing wrong if it gets a bit more free form, but yeah, these focused ones are also, fun in their own rights. Having said all that, I'll just kind of reiterate a point I made already briefly, and that's what makes arguably the defining characteristic of a human being is its innate ability to lead its own life, to govern its own self. Now, it's very tempting to try to root all of our behaviors and forces beyond our control, because then you don't have to take responsibility for your actions. You don't have to develop the virtues that are necessary to lead your life. It's really, really easy to kind of get stuck in this arrested development sort of thing, this sort of Peter Pan complex of sorts that you could have this sort of, how to put this, the attitude of a 13-year-old as an 80-year-old, which is to say, nothing's up to me. Even if you believe that very little is up to you, it's important that you remain conscientious or rather just mindful of what is up to you. And that has to do with, again, at the very least, arguably things like taste and preference. Again, your interpretation on an aesthetic level as well as a moral level. I mean, there's no such thing as morality without human beings. I mean, you could make a strong case for that. And if you believe that all human beings are to a large extent predetermined or pre-programmed or predisposed, then suddenly being a moral person doesn't really mean anything. It just means you got lucky. You were so lucky that you were born in a moral place in a free society. It's not really an accomplishment. It's not really an achievement. All right, I'll leave it at that. Great conversation, folks.
Okay. Does anybody have any topics for next week? Any suggestions for next week? For
I have a topic.
Quantum mechanic.
Seriously. Quantum mechanics, yeah. But I was thinking, I'm going to grocery stores a lot recently because I've been cooking a lot, and I see a lot of people, maybe not wearing masks. And I was kind of thinking about our obligation to society versus our obligation to ourselves, because a lot of people seem to not want to wear masks or not want to social distance from each other. So I was kind of wanting to go into that topic, and it also has real world applications, not only to this crisis that's going on right now, this pandemic, but also to climate change. Is that something that an individual needs to do on like a, on a more micro level, or is it something that we need to do something about on a macro level? So kind of like, does a person's single decision matter, I guess? Does it make an influence,
I like it. I like the real world application.
So could you say individual
How can we
society,
phrase?
your obligation to society?
Yeah, it's social
whatever way you guys
distancing.
want to go. Yeah.
What was
The
it?
moral issue of social distancing.
Yeah, because I mean, if I get the coronavirus and I don't social distance and I pass on the disease to somebody else and they die as a result of that, am I at fault for their death? Or, can that not really be determined, I guess? I don't know.
I'm sorry. So how are we interpreting it for the topic?
Maybe our obligations to society is, I don't know.
Obligation to society. I think that can work for this.
Yeah. And we could talk about, coronavirus or climate change. I think those are very good to, fields to go into.
Gotcha. Okay.
Coronavirus!
So we got some topics here. I just thought of one, but so we'll go again by numbers, and I'll tell the topics right now. So quantum mechanics, obligation to society, and maybe does God exist? You can go with that. So if you'd like to choose obligations to society, push number 1, quantum mechanics, 2, does God exist, 3.
Did we really say quantum mechanics?
I think you guys said it. I don't remember.
Arlen, I'm sorry, what are the numbers again?
It looks like one's gonna win.
Quantum mechanics, God, and what?
Obligation to society is 1. And does God exist is 3. Looks like 1 is winning. I'll push 1 too. Okay, we can just go ahead and say call it right now. Obligation to society is going to be next week's topic. And with that, concludes the meeting, guys.
All right.
Ardenzo.
Thank you so much, Seniha, Habila, Seher, for your
Thank
wonderful
you guys.
time.
See y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Thanks to Orlando for hosting. And yeah, looking forward to the summer session for sure.
Guys. Have a good one. I'm going to end the meeting for everybody.
Okay.
See you later.